Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, aliens and humans alike. This is Robert Phoenix. Tonight is the 19th of September, and you are listening to the Sunday version of Free Association Radio, Far Sunday. And tonight I'm really grateful and thrilled to have our guest on from all the way from South Africa. His name is Michael Tellinger. And Michael is a cosmologist, amongst many other things. And he has really spent the latter part of, I'd say, the last 5 to 10 years going deeply into the story of the human species, genetics, DNA, and in particular some very interesting finds in his native South Africa. From Eric von Däniken to Zecharia Sitchin to our guest tonight, Michael Tellinger, many people, many researchers and writers in the modern era have been excited, curious, and at times even obsessed with the origin of our species. Zecharia Sitchin, of course, is probably the modern sort of gatekeeper and knowledge keeper of the tale of the Anunnaki and the planet Nibiru. And Sitchin, of course, uses the Epic of Gilgamesh for the foundation of his exploration and discoveries, and it's become his philosopher's stone, his Rosetta Stone, to understand who we are and where we came from. Of course, Eric von Däniken used a number of pieces from all over the planet, everything from the writings and etchings on temple walls in Palenque to tapestries in churches in Central Europe. And there are many other folks out there who are desperately trying to understand who we are and where we came from. Who created us? Are we just a series of accidents, or are we a race of beings that have been literally farmed here for a number of different reasons? And was there really only one race that's farmed us and it became our quote unquote our agents, so to speak, on this world, our agencies? Are there more than one iteration of the human species? And if so, when did those iterations occur? So without further ado, I'm going to bring Michael Tellinger on tonight. Now, here's how tonight's going to go. Michael's going to be on with us for an hour. Okay, he's been touring fairly nonstop throughout the United States, and he's had 4 back-to-back nights. And my friends down in Taos just hosted him and said he was terrific. So he's a little spent. So we're going to have him on for an hour. We're going to try to get into the meat of this. And if you want to call in a little bit later, probably about 45 minutes into the show, I'll take a few phone calls. And if you have any pressing questions that you've always wanted to ask Michael, and I know some of you out there are already familiar with his work, you can call in and we'll take a few calls at the end of the show. But without further ado, for the next hour, let's journey through time and explore our origins, the origins of the species, with Michael Tellinger. Good evening, Michael. How are you?
Hi, Robert. Excellent. Thanks for having me on your show. It's lovely to be talking to you and to be in the United States. And as you mentioned, taking a night out after 4 days back-to-back, which has been quite grueling.
So a friend of mine down in Taos who went and saw you said he's deeply connected and witchy smart.
Those are very kind words. I appreciate getting feedback like that. It's always nice, you know. You never know how people take the stuff in. You know, I do my presentation, and you know, obviously I put a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy, and then people talk to you afterwards, and then they leave. But you never really get to know until you get feedback from other sources of what people had to say. And to hear positive feedback is always wonderful. It makes it all worth the effort, and you know, the journey through the United States as we are taking now.
So just to give folks an idea as to what you're doing right now, you're on a pretty far-reaching tour of the United States. Now, how many dates are you into this tour currently?
Well, we have 26 stops, 26 presentations throughout the USA, starting in New York all the way down the East Coast and across the USA, up the Californian coast all the way to the north, and then back across, making our way back to Vermont. And that's 26 stops, and tomorrow we're in Phoenix or Scottsdale, and that is number 12, stop number 12, yeah.
Okay, so you've done 11, you've got 12, so tomorrow's 12, so you've got another 15 stops. Now, the person that turned me on to you is Janet Gauthier, who's the wife of Brad Hockenmeyer, who actually interviewed you down at his house.
Okay.
And Janet was raving about the presentation of the show, and she said that really it all comes together with the visuals and everything that you bring. Can you talk a little bit about your presentation? And I know that's kind of part of your background as well. Can you talk about how you brought this all together so you can really give people a much fuller understanding about your work?
Sure. And thanks for allowing me to do that, because it's not always that people ask this kind of question, or interviewers or media people. So when you start talking about the origins of humankind and ancient human history and ancient civilizations, people have preconceived ideas about these things. So what I've done in my presentation is pull together what seems to be a very disparate image of human origins and religion and civilizations and ancient cultures and so forth, and show the people how everything is actually connected and it all comes from the same source that in some circles is called unity. And once you get that, it becomes really exciting. And then what I do is I also link it to sometimes referred to as esoteric information, like sacred geometry and so forth, which you realize very quickly is nothing wishy-washy about. That is actually we're dealing with the laws of nature here that mankind has been really struggling to try and define with our feeble attempts in physics and science and maths and chemistry to try and understand the laws of nature, and we are very, very far from that. And once you start studying that and realizing how the laws of nature or sacred geometry forms the basis of all stuff in the universe and how it pulls everything together, it starts to form a very fascinating tapestry that links ancient knowledge and ancient cultures all together. And then we start looking at presenting Sumerian tablets and what we read and translations of the Sumerian tablets. And you mentioned Zecharia Sitchin, and obviously he is by far the most outstanding scholar who has taken that under his wing and has become the foremost translator and proponent of the Anunnaki and explaining to us what is really going on in the Sumerian tablets in his translations. But the one thing that Zecharia Sitchin has not been able to deliver, and neither have any of the other researchers and translators, is deliver the physical evidence and the physical proof for their translations and their theory based on those translations, or their conclusions on those translations. And that's really where we step in, and where I come in and bring the physical evidence and the physical proof of these ancient civilizations at the tip of southern Africa, going back to about 300,000 years ago, mining gold and linking them directly to the arrival on Earth of the Anunnaki, or as the Bible calls them, the Anakim, the giants, and creating a cloned species, which they refer to in the translations as the Lulu Amelu, or the primitive worker. And their single-minded objective was to mine gold. And this is the discoveries that we've now made, and I have linked very, I believe, clearly with the discoveries that I've made over the last 2 or 3 years to these ancient cultures. And not only that, but also by strange sequence of coincidences, discovering that these ancient cultures had an advanced knowledge of technology and energy and the knowledge of frequency and how to use all that energy, sound frequencies, and frequency for everything that they did. And that is really what I guess is the punchline that I deliver.
Right. And the physical evidence that you refer to, According to your website and your work, is this the Adamic calendar? Is this one of the pieces of evidence?
Well, Adam's calendar is one of the pieces of evidence, absolutely. We now are starting to call it Enki's calendar because we are convinced from a number of supportive pieces of evidence that it was actually a calendar site that was constructed or commissioned by Enki, the Sumerian, one of the three, what you could call the Holy Trinity of the Sumerian religion, Anu and his two sons Enlil and Enki. And Enki was the creator god of the human race and the geneticist and the medicine man. And he was the guy that set up all the mining operations in southern Africa, or in what the Sumerian tablets calls the Abzu. And by reverse engineering that word Abzu, you work out very quickly where the Abzu is. If it is indeed the place where all the gold came from, then there can be absolutely no doubt that the Abzu is in southern Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Mozambique, pretty much concentrated in that area. And so yes, the Enki's calendar is one of the arguments that or Adam's calendar as we call it in our book, and but that's just a flagship in among millions of stone ruins that points to a very, very vast, vanished civilization that was destroyed by some sort of cataclysm. About probably, my guess is about 12 to 13,000 years ago, in which what we refer to as the flood, and what all ancient cultures refer to as the flood as well.
Right. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Enlil he's responsible for bringing on the flood. Isn't that correct?
Well, what seems to be the situation is that they recognized that the flood was going to happen as a result of a set of cosmic coincidences or cosmic activities, when a large celestial body, which many people believe to be the planet Nibiru, that is still questionable, but let's leave it at that. Some celestial body came into very close proximity of planet Earth, and it was so close, it came so close that the geophysical forces were so huge that they caused the ice sheets of Antarctica to slide into the oceans and caused giant tidal waves to just make their waves like giant rubber bands moving from south to north right across planet Earth, and just destroyed all civilization, pretty much all life and all structures and any kind of dwellings or cities or habitation, and caused havoc on planet Earth. And what the Sumerian tablets seem to tell us is that Enki and Enlil and Anu and all the Sumerian the Anunnakis knew about this impending disaster, so they prepared themselves for it. And it seems that Enlil himself, who at that point in time had enough of this new creation and the trials and tribulation on this planet called Earth, decided that they would use this occasion to wipe out what they've created and what they've started on planet Earth.
Right.
Yeah, but Enki, his brother, the creator of the human race, felt differently, and that is where the whole story of Noah and the ark and God telling Noah how to build the ark and the stories in the Bible and the Sumerian tablets differ slightly, because in the Sumerian tablets Enki tells Ziusudra how to build a submersible boat. So we get to understand that the ark was actually something that was completely closed in, that could be completely covered by water, not just like a ship or a boat that could float on top of water.
Right.
So it goes, yeah.
And Enlil actually begrudgingly respected the Noah character in the Epic of Gilgamesh and let him go about and do his thing, didn't he?
Well, there was always Enlil and Enki always seemed to be at odds. They seem to be the yin yang, or the positive and negative of the Anunnaki, and that in itself they create a very interesting archetype in pretty much everything that we deal with as a species on this planet. and they could indeed be the source of this positive and negative activity that we face on a daily basis on this planet.
Interesting, yeah. Because one seems to be the creative principle, and the other seems to be the organizational principle.
Yeah, and the controlling principle, and this is how it's done. And if you don't do it my way, it's my way or the highway kind of thing,
Yeah, that's a great distinction. I always felt like Enlil was like the bean counter of the two,
Yeah, I think he was a lot more than that. By my gut feel and my research would tell me that he was a lot more than that, and he was probably what one would call the vindictive or the dictator god in the
Sure. Yeah, I was being slightly reductive, but yeah, I mean, I think that his function seemed to be a lot more Apollonian, while Enki was a lot more Dionysian. If you want to break it down into those two pieces, my sense too is also that Enki fell in love with his creations. He really, literally and figuratively. I mean, he fell in love with them, and he had quite an affection towards them as well.
Yeah, and then he procreated with them as well.
Exactly, absolutely.
Therefore, many people talk about the two creations in the Bible. Where in the Sumerian tablets we read about the two creations as well. For people that aren't familiar with the Sumerian tablets, I really recommend that they go and do some research. Read Zecharia Sitchin, but other than that, go online and go to the museums of the world and check out the Sumerian tablets that the museums have on display and look at them and read the translations for yourself and start getting this information into your subconscious, because although it might not mean much to you if you read it now in isolation, once you've read a bunch of them, 100 or 200 of them or so, you start seeing patterns, recurring patterns, and the same characters and the same situations that are being referred to. And these are tablets that are being collected from diverse and distinct parts of the world that are not necessarily from the same little find or discovery. So what it tells us that there's definitely a set of activities and characters and occurrences that these ancient Sumerians wrote about and referred to. And we've got to start taking them seriously and stop treating them like, some mumbo-jumbo nonsense written by ancient civilizations because they were drunk or they were trying to confuse us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the Sumerian tablets and the Epic of Gilgamesh is probably one of the most important artifacts that we have at our disposal. I mean, there's, of course, we have the Bible and the Colburn Bible, and there's a few other pieces out there, but it's very significant. And I remember getting exposed to it in college, and and just seeing the crossover between the Old Testament and the Epic of Gilgamesh just really blew my mind. What about let's go back to this whole concept of gold, Michael. And a lot of the people listening to my show are pretty sophisticated, and they may have their own ideas as to why gold was important to the Anunnaki. But I'd like to get your take on why gold, and to this day, why is gold so important as a result of all of this?
Well, once again, we got to go back to the Sumerian tablets and take at face value what they tell us. And originally they tell us that they needed gold. They chose gold. They found gold to be the one element that could help them in their plight of their own potential destruction of their planet or serious damage to their planet by the effects of cosmic rays and the destructive frequencies that were attacking their planet from space. We know that from Earth, from our own experiences here with our so-called holes in our ozone layer, and how we've been warned over the past 30 or 40 years. Oh, there's a huge hole in the ozone layer over the Antarctica, and there's a huge hole that's appeared over there, and the havoc that it's caused on planet Earth and those kind of things. Well, things could get a lot worse than that. And so the Sumerian tablets described Anunnaki as having those exact kind of problems, but a lot worse than what we've experienced here on Earth. And they found gold to be the one substance that could solve that problem. And the gold doesn't seem to be a metal or an item that is easily found in our galaxy and possibly even in the universe. And yet we have an abundance of it here on planet Earth. and they found that abundance on this earth, and they came here looking for it. They found it, and they started mining it. And that's really as simple as it is. You know, if we found something really amazing on the moon or on Mars, and we found that that could enhance some aspect of our lives here on planet Earth in ways that we can't even imagine now, or put our planet into some utopian spin or something, we would go to Mars or the moon and we'd start mining the living daylights out of it and bring it back to Earth. Well, that's pretty much what happened, except the other way. And for those people that have watched that incredible movie Avatar, that's pretty much the reverse situation of what happened to planet Earth. The storyline in Avatar, it's beautiful, you know.
Yeah, I was actually going to go there. It's pretty interesting, and in fact, there's even the whole concept of creating the Avatar, creating this hybrid species.
Yeah, exactly.
That Cameron puts out there. Yeah, it's fascinating.
You know, Robert, the thing is that these things are actually very simple. What we got to stop doing as arrogant, egotistic humanoids on this planet in the 21st century, stop thinking that we've got all the answers and we know everything. We know nothing, and history has shown us that we know nothing. And if you just do a very simple calculation as to how much do we know about our human history, you'll very quickly realize that we know so little that it actually becomes laughable. And we've got to start putting together the new pieces of evidence or start from scratch basically, and reconstruct the real history of planet Earth and humanity and our species, and realize that there's been a very long and winding and twisted history to planet Earth, and we just played, as the human race, are playing a very small, teeny-weeny part for the last 300,000 years, which is directly linked to the Anunnaki and their manipulation and their genetic cloning of this new species called Homo sapien in their own image with their own genetic material. So, in essence, we can say that we are aliens. We are genetic material and byproduct of an alien species on planet Earth that arrived here looking for gold. And that's pretty much what it seems to be.
Right. I would agree with you in terms of the lay portrayal, the layman's portrayal, and the layman's understanding of evolution here on this planet. And I would put myself in that category, and I put many other people, even though we read a lot and we do everything in our power to try to untie these knots. But I'm also of the opinion that there are people that really do know what's happened here, Michael, and they really do know what's going on and has gone on here, and they have been working, behind the curtain with a lot of the information that you and your colleagues and some of the other folks have been uncovering. And as a result of that, they've got a head start, and they're actually working on some very sophisticated stuff that if we had the opportunity to tap into, it could radically change our paradigms overnight. So to that end, how do you see the continuum of the work that you have been immersed in, and how it bleeds over into these other realms of, black technology, secret technology, even secret societies that have the ability to have the history or the prehistory at their disposal?
Yeah, that's very important, and it certainly that whole area of our understanding is very murky and has many different layers and aspects to it. From what I see from our discoveries in Southern Africa with these ancient civilizations, it seems that the first 270,000 years or so was very single-mindedly managed or controlled without many problems, by just continually growing the number of people and humans that were involved and engaged in mining, gold mining, and then mining of iron and copper and other minerals throughout Southern Africa in very, very large numbers. And just for the sake of your listeners, we need to put this into context. If there's any doubt in anyone's mind where King Solomon's mines were, or where the so-called Abzu is, where the gold came from, let there be no doubt whatsoever that Southern Africa is it. there are at least 10 million ancient stone structures that we have discovered, all connected, all linked together by very mysterious ancient roads, all connected by never-ending agricultural terraces. So what it tells us, there was a vast civilization of probably 50 million people or more that lived there for a long period of time. They were well cared for, well taken care of. They were well fed. They didn't go hungry. It was a very cohesive and peaceful and organized society that operated around the mining of gold and other minerals for a very, very, very long period of time. My current estimate is about 270,000 years. And then something happened, this thing called the flood. And that caused the problem, the really big problem. It did a lot of things, and it basically pretty much wiped out all life on planet Earth. And this civilization and the mining operations had to be restarted after the flood. And that was restarted with a slightly different psychology after the flood. And then we suddenly start seeing the whole concept of gods and worshipping, the concept of temples and gods and worshipping, and the control and the appearance of kings and high priests on planet Earth that started to control groups of people,
right?
Control them with higher knowledge, having a knowledge that the rest of the people did not have. And if you read Zecharia Sitchin's work, you'll see how the Sumerian tablets tell us that the information was passed down from the gods, the Anunnaki, to the priests, to the kings, and then to the humans. And it was this whole hierarchical structure that was created. And the knowledge, the advanced knowledge of advanced technology and sacred geometry and the laws of nature by which you can manipulate things was held by a very small group of elite priests and possibly some kings, this royal bloodline that has filtered through the last 12,000 years into the royal bloodlines that we still see today, which would include the Vatican and all these other so-called religious movements that are all interconnected. Although they looked like they are distinct and separate on the outside, they're all interconnected. And just to throw a cat among the pigeons for those people that have not figured this out for themselves yet, think about like the word, if you think Jews and Muslims are separate, that is not the case. They all come from the same pod. And even the names that give us their sacred symbols and their sacred gods and their sacred prophets are interlinked. The word Kabbalah, the sacred Hebrew script and text and tree of life, the Kabbalah is actually a combination of the word Kab, which is the cube worshipped by the Muslims, and Allah, the God worshipped by the Muslims. So when you combine the two, you get the Kabbalah, and you realize that we've been messed with and manipulated so beautifully for so long. It's spectacular.
This kind of dovetails with some of the research that I've done on my own, and you're actually in the neighborhood of a guy by the name of Robert Shapiro, who's written a number of books. Are you familiar with him by any chance?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
He's I believe he's in Scottsdale, and he's got a series of books called The Explorer Race. And unlike your work, which is grounded and rooted in artifacts and ancient archaeology, his material is much more I wouldn't say it's more multidimensional, but it falls into that channeling realm. And I'm generally not a big fan of that, but I discovered his work back in the 90s. And there's a book called Shining the Light. And in Shining the Light, he doesn't talk about the Anunnaki. He actually, this is the channeled entity talking through Shapiro. But he talks about how there is an outpost in South Africa. And the outpost of South Africa is related to Atlantis. So these were a group of Atlanteans that were living in South Africa. And when Atlantis collapses into the water, which theoretically could be a flood or a manifestation of the flood, this group of people decide that they need help. And what they do is they reach out to the first king / ruler of Atlantis, philosopher, king, ruler, which according to this source is Lucifer, a fallen angel, part Orion, part Syrian. And from that point, the Orions come to South Africa, and they work with this group of people in South Africa and help them. But what happens is, according to this work, is they hide their DNA off. That's number one. The second piece is they create what's called the caretaker race. And the caretaker race is the race of folks that are basically the group that you're talking about, the high priests, the ruling class, the royal bloodlines, the royal families. But I found it interesting that it was all in South Africa. And I just filed that away. And then when I discovered you, excuse me, in your work through Janet, not very long ago, I found the two pieces coming together to be interesting. Now, the terminology and the races are obviously different here, but nonetheless, there is still kind of a common theme with that area. And he came to this without any of the physical evidence that you came to. So I'm curious, in your world, where does Atlantis play as far as being related to the findings that you've been exploring in the Anunnaki in South Africa?
Well, I think the important common denominator there is what you mentioned is the Orions, because in African culture, Orion is suddenly playing a very important role, because we discovered that Adam's calendar, or Enki's calendar as we call it now, is linked to the rise of Orion's belt. And we have a very distinct link to that, not only Orion, but also the Horus bird. And the Horus bird that greets the rising sun on the spring equinox in the southern hemisphere, looking at the three stones and the stars of Orion, pointing to the skies, telling us whence we come from, I guess, or something like that, or giving us some sort of information. The link to the Atlanteans I find is a very interesting one, because what I discovered is that these ancient civilizations that were mining gold there used energy, used sound frequency as a source of energy, and there's absolutely no doubt about that, because we're not just speculating about this anymore. We found the tools and we found the measurements in the stone circles that are still alive and active today. They're still giving us frequency at 14.5 gigahertz at 72 decibels that is alive and active, and we can utilize it once we figure out how to tap into that frequency and convert it to all kinds of different applications. What is interesting is that the structures that they built to generate this energy, the stone structures, resemble in very great detail what we call today magnetrons. A magnetron, which is a high-frequency, high-energy generating device we use in laser beams and in microwaves, and the death ray that Nikola Tesla and the Japanese then later stole from him, or you borrowed from him, should I say. What I'm trying to say is that these ancient cultures used the same kind of structures a long, long time ago to generate energy, tapping into planet Earth, generating huge amounts of energy. And I was recently told by a psychic woman in Johannesburg that the same structures that were used by these ancient cultures in southern Africa to generate energy were misused and abused in Atlantis to generate extremely high amounts of energy, which actually was the cause for the sinking or the destruction of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting link for me, and the most immediate link that I have.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of these structures. Physically, do you fly over parts of South Africa and are able to see them, or how did you unearth some of these structures that you're referring to?
Well, the guy that actually started bringing them to our attention is Johann Heine. Johann he's in the firefighting business, forestry firefighting business. And for 20 odd years or more, he was flying over all these forestry areas and the areas in southern Africa, and realizing that, seeing these circular stone structures, and he started photographing them, and he compiled a large number of a few thousands of photographs of these stone structures, many of which are on tops of mountains, strangely enough, and that was a curious thing that we had to deal with for a while to figure out why are the ones on tops of mountains exposed and there seems to be less further down. And then Johann tried to bring this to the attention of the authorities, in South Africa, and the universities and archaeologists, and he kept on being told that, stop wasting our time. These are just, Bantu and cattle kraal and Bantu structures from just a few hundred years ago, and they have little historic value and stuff like that. And then, fortunately, Johan didn't take that as a serious answer from them, and he started analyzing their structure and realized that these things are aligned with the rise of the sun and the equinoxes and the solstices and very advanced knowledge of sacred geometry that is encoded in their structure and so forth. And then in 2003, he discovered, or should I say rediscovered, what I then later called Adam's calendar, and started measuring that, and realized that it's perfectly aligned with the cardinal points of planet Earth and all the equinoxes and solstices. Plus, you can measure the entire year, every day of the year, still reasonably accurately with the calendar by the setting of the sun, where the shadow falls when the sun sets on a daily basis. And it goes from solstice to solstice, from summer solstice to winter solstice, and then it turns back, and then there's the shadow that falls on the Adam's calendar rock that tells you exactly where you are in the year. So it's these discoveries that by Johan that brought us together, and we just carried on the work, and about a year or so after I started working on these stone ruins and these stone structures in Southern Africa, or South Africa especially, I realized that the stones that were used to build these structures had very specific properties, and those properties were that they ring like bells. Mm-hmm. Stones were not just randomly chosen from all the stones lying close by. That's not the case. They were chosen for their acoustic properties, and from that moment on, it was like a roller coaster ride, and the discoveries were just spectacular. That we're dealing with an ancient civilization that understood the frequency, the power of sound, and using the power of sound as an energy source.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key. And that goes back to some of the stuff that Frank Herbert was playing with in Dune, and on Arrakis, where Paul and his tribe were using the power of sound, and they were actually using the power of sound amplified as a weapon. But nonetheless, it's a really interesting piece, and one that I think that ultimately is a huge key for us. Here in this world, being able to kind of level the playing field, so to speak, for just about everybody. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One, which is not necessarily maybe the question that you would normally get in terms of this work, but more about your life and how it might relate to this work. You were born and raised in South Africa, am I correct?
I was actually born in Europe. I was born in the Czech Republic.
Okay, and how long have you been in How long were you in South Africa for?
We arrived in South Africa just after the Russian invasion in 1968.
Okay.
I was a mining engineer in Czechoslovakia at that stage, and he decided he had enough of the Russians, and he wanted to get the hell out of there, and he chose for some strange reason he chose South Africa. So I arrived in South Africa as a young boy, and obviously grew up speaking Afrikaans. I went to Afrikaans schools, and pretty much became an Afrikaans cultured individual, if you can call it that. And then when I left school, I grew up on the mines, the gold mines, and then eventually platinum mines. Mm-hmm. And so I completely understand the culture and the environment around which the gold mining industries in South Africa operate. And I can tell you something, from my restructuring the gold mining activities in Southern Africa 200,000 years ago, mm-hmm. Not much has changed.
Yeah.
And this might come as a shock to people listening to this. Not much has changed. The reason I'm saying this is because when you grow up in the gold mines and you live in these small gold mining towns, okay, everything is provided for the people that work on the mines and live in the mining communities. Everything. Your housing is for free. You get garden services. Everything is for free. All the sporting facilities are for free. Schooling is for free. Some days of the one day a week on a Sunday or whatever, you go to the mine club right, in the center of the mine village, and they give you a free meal and stuff like that. And once a year, all the miners get together and they have what they call a Christmas tree, the Christmas celebration every year on Christmas Day. And they hand out presents, free presents to every single individual and their children on the mine. It is quite spectacular to see what actually goes down and how closely linked it must be to what was probably happening 200, 300,000 years ago with those original mining colonies, where everything circled and focused around the mining of gold and supporting the guys that were doing the mining with enough food, agriculture, housing, comforts, everything that they needed to enable them to do the mining. It's spectacular. Yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah, because that's kind of where I wanted to go with this was, how it relates to modern day South Africa and the conditions and the social conditions, and I think you pretty much nailed that one. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and then when you talk about like the most mysterious ruin in all of Africa, well, other than the Great Pyramid, obviously, or the pyramids, is Great Zimbabwe. The ruins in Zimbabwe of Great Zimbabwe, which I believe absolutely was Enki's house or Enki's main residence in southern Africa, as in among all the mining colonies. And the reason I say this is jokingly, I always say in my presentations, is when you arrive in a mining town anywhere in South Africa, it's very easy to spot where the mine manager lives. Just look around you and find the biggest hill and find the biggest house on top of that hill.
Right.
That's where the mine manager lives.
Yeah.
And that's what Great Zimbabwe is. It's the big house on the hill. It is the most spectacular and by far the most impressive of any of the stone structures in southern Africa. And that's where the mine manager lived. And that mine manager's name was Enki.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. To the north of South Africa, a few miles north, more than a few, there's another very interesting creation story or creation myth, and that's the myth of the Dogon and Nomo. And have you done much work connecting on the Anunnaki with the creation myths of the Dogon and the Nomos, and if so, where does it overlap, and where does it not fit?
Well, I've done some work, not enough. I need to do a lot more. But I've been so caught up in what we're discovering that there seems to be not enough time most of the time at this stage. I guess that has to change. But what I can tell you is that there are absolutely very, very strong links to the Dogon people of Mali to the southern African cultures, and what I believe were the prototype civilizations on Earth of humans in those gold mining colonies, and from there all the human civilizations and groups probably sprung up afterwards, because we find every symbol that you can think of. I'm exaggerating, not everything, but many of the great petroglyphs or images or carvings that you've seen around the world, you'll find in South Africa or in southern Africa. And the age of these carvings in southern Africa, because of the kind of rock that they're carved into, can very clearly be dated to way beyond 200,000, maybe even older than 300,000, maybe even older than that, 1,000 years old. And that makes it really interesting, especially like the Egyptian Ankh. The Egyptian Ankh is no longer comes from Egypt. We now know that it comes from South Africa. Found the Egyptian Ankh being carved in very, very hard andesite rock with erosion on it that is absolutely, and cracks and erosion on the cracks that is spectacular. The link to the Dogon people we have is where they had like these four symbols of the four seeds of creation,
right?
That the Dogon had. Well, I found one of those, and I bet the others will also be there. But one of those symbols of the four, the incomplete circle with the lines coming out of it at very specific places on that incomplete circle. Well, we've got one of those beautifully carved images in the same rocks that we find the Ankh and many other pentagons with serpents and stars inside them, and all these spectacular images that are just breathtaking, and they're extremely old.
Interesting. In terms of quote unquote mainstream science or mainstream historians, are there people who are part of the sort of the more classical university realm? Have they embraced your work at all, or has there been any interest? Or do they shun your work? I mean, where do you fit in that continuum?
That's very interesting. The scientists love what we do. They absolutely love it and embrace it. And I'm talking from astrophysicists to molecular scientists to nuclear physicists and chemical people in chemistry and so forth. They love it what we do because they can see the scientific arguments that we put out there and how we build our case. And, well, I guess how I build my case at this stage is because at this stage I've sort of separated myself from all the other people that I started doing this research with. And they love what I share with them. Where we have an absolute rift and what seems to be an insurmountable chasm is with the archaeologists, the anthropologists, and the historians.
Right.
The geologists love it as well. They're fully, squarely behind us. We have some of the most senior geologists in South Africa that have come out and absolutely supported everything that we say and claim about the age and antiquity of these structures. They obviously don't go into who built it, but they're prepared to say this stuff is really, really old. It's not part of the bedrock. It's man-made and all this kind of stuff, the claims that we make. But the archaeologists and these guys, unfortunately, there seems to be an insurmountable rift there. We have a huge problem with the archaeological and anthropological and especially historical departments in South Africa.
Yeah.
They don't like me. They try and poo-poo whatever I do all the time and discredit the work with their statements and the media and so forth. It's very unfortunate. The sad thing is that they've done no research, and I can say this with absolute certainty. They know absolutely nothing about the subjects that we discuss. They've never even been to the sites that we discuss, and yet they're prepared to go out on record in public and make statements, derogatory statements about our research and our work, when they've never even been to these sites and done any research work there.
Well, I'm sure they have a huge amount invested in their story,
Yeah.
And for them to begin to disassemble their story, well, they'd have to disassemble their entire lives, because it's what they've worked for, which is a reflection on some level, on a much more minor scale, of what the rest of humanity theoretically would have to do in order to understand the greater story, the greater implication of your story about who we are, where we come from.
So there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, so they're just the most, I think, severe case of the front line on that. I was doing some research on this and on the subject, and one of the things that I came across, and you may find this fascinating, maybe you've already seen this, was from the creationist camp, and how the creationists respond to Sitchin and this material of alien DNA and alien genetics, is that they are not, some of them aren't shunning this. Some of them are saying this is actually probably true, but these people are the fallen angels. These people are the devils of the world that inhabit our world. And so it's an interesting twist. They're not pushing it away. They're saying, this could be true, but if that's the case, though, and we are part of that, where is the Gordian knot, the religious Gordian knot there? Is it that we have to redeem ourselves by accepting Jesus Christ, and therefore the redemption of our alien bodies and our alien origins takes place? We get absolution, or is it something different? It's a fascinating take on Sitchin and this whole concept of Enki and Enlil and fallen angels as being our creator gods. Have you run across this theory as well?
Well, absolutely. Robert, I've done quite a number of presentations to religious groups and Christian groups that invited me, and what happens is that, because at no stage do I ever degrade or badmouth God or the Creator, or say anything negative about Jesus Christ or anything like that. In fact, I do the opposite. What happens is when you present the research and the work that I've been involved in, is it actually opens up the whole religious box of dogma that many strong, deeply religious people find themselves in. It opens it up and it allows them to see how much bigger and greater the creative process is, and how much bigger and greater the divine being or the divine creator or source or God, if you want to use that word without getting confused, how much bigger those things are, and realizing that maybe up to that point they might have been putting God into a box, which in many instances is the case, and they live in that dogma and that fear. Once you open that up and you show them that this is a much bigger and a much more beautiful process than anyone has ever imagined, and that people like Jesus Christ and many of the other prophets that have walked the earth before and since him as well have come to earth to try and share this information with us.
Mm-hmm.
They feel very enlightened, relieved, but also confused after my presentation, because now they get this information. I don't take anything away from what they've been told. I just show them a slightly different and a bigger alternative that has limitless possibilities. And now suddenly they feel confused. What am I? Oh my God! I can't dislike this guy because he didn't tell me that Jesus Christ is an idiot or God doesn't exist. He told me the opposite, and I find that a fascinating situation where I actually enjoy doing this with religious groups, because I find that the dogmatic group, the religious groups, are just so consumed by fear,
Mm-hmm.
that they just fear, petrified of moving out of their little box, because they're really scared that God's going to smite them with a laser beam from the sky or something like that. And once you show them that's not going to happen, and that God doesn't want to harm them, that the divine being is actually all love, and it can be nothing but love, it starts to change your perception and could be a life-changing experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. We just had somebody on the line here, and they went away. Excuse me, because you and I were deep in conversation. But we've got probably about another 8 to 10 minutes or so on the hour that Michael wanted to share with us. And if you want to talk to Michael, maybe in the next 8 to 10 minutes, here's the number. It's 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. And we'll try to get you on and have a couple of questions for Michael before he gets some sleep and gets ready for his next date tomorrow. Speaking of dates, Michael, you're going to be where tomorrow? At Phoenix, Scottsdale?
Phoenix? Yeah, Scottsdale, Arizona tomorrow evening. And then we move on to Sedona, and then we up to San Diego, then we up to LA, then we up Californian coast to San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, all the way up the coast.
Right.
Oregon, Seattle, and then we come back across to Salt Lake City, Denver, Kansas, and then eventually Minneapolis and Vermont, and then we're out of here.
Well, Salt Lake City should be a real trip for you. I mean, you've got that whole Mormon overlay in Salt Lake City, and and they've got their own fairly interesting creation myths as well, and that should be an interesting cross-pollination for you in terms of who you run into and and how they work with your material.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. What I do is I just present the evidence that we've got, and how people react to it is their own thing. And what seems to be happening is that is an amazing response of resonating with the information. People somehow are able they're not offended in any way. In fact, they feel that they absolutely resonate with this information, and they are able to bring it into their own area of understanding and their own reality, and somehow plug it in and allow it to enhance their own level of knowledge and all that, and which is fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you wholeheartedly on that. One of the other things that Janet down in Taos told me is that in addition to the work that you're doing with the calendar and the structures in South Africa and the Anunnaki, you also have an idea for a new society and a new civilization. And we don't have a lot of time, and maybe we can save the bulk of that for another interview with you. But I'm wondering if you could touch on that briefly and how that came to you and how that dovetails with the work that you're doing.
Well, it dovetails perfectly, and it actually, in a way, answers the question you asked a little while ago about, about my life, where I come from, what I've done, and so forth. And what seems to be happening is that my entire life up to now has been a dress rehearsal for what I'm doing today.
Mm-hmm.
All the different things I've done, in show business, entertainment, studying pharmaceutics at Wits Medical School, getting interested in the DNA and stuff like that, and then working in television and so forth, allowing me to be able to do this work and present it in a way that people that haven't had the background that I've had would find a little bit more difficult to do. What I find is that the ancient civilizations that we are now discovering their basic, very low understanding of what they did, how they lived, and what kind of energy sources they used. I call it like that it seems to be some sort of a completion of a cycle of prophecy of some sort. The first days will be like the end days, and the end days will be like the first days. And our main obsession in the world today is to find energy, free energy, to liberate ourselves from the oppression and to be able to survive without having to worry about how we're going to make ends meet at the end of the month.
Right.
What seems to be the case is that we're rediscovering what the ancients knew, and I believe we're very, very close to tapping into the free energy that they left behind for us. It's still there in large numbers. All the stone circles are alive and well and kicking, giving us free energy. We just need to figure out how to tap into that. Now, there are many prophecies, Mayan prophecies and other ancient civilizations of these giant, a long period of, cycles of the rise and falls in civilization and so forth. And we're reaching 2012 now, and there are many kinds of predictions about what might or might not happen in 2012 or even before 2012, and that many people may die and so forth. And the point is that what happens if we have a complete meltdown of the system that we have today? The communication system, the electronic system, the satellites in space, all these things. If something happens and it's just within a few seconds, it all melts down and it's gone. What happens to the human race? Well, that is an interesting scenario because, first of all, people will start dying en masse because you can just imagine the chaos that will ensue. And I think we've seen quite a few Hollywood movies that show that in spectacular anticipation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
But let's step away from that and be slightly more practical about this and say, well, if we can learn from the ancients and realize that energy is actually frequency, a frequency is energy, is a source of energy. If we start to learn how to use that, we could actually apply this in a post-apocalyptic or cataclysmic event on planet Earth today. And we don't have to go back to the society and the structure that we embrace today. And that society and structure is based on money and the capitalist system. Now, many people believe that capitalism and money is something that evolved naturally into where we are today. Well, they'd be wrong. That is not the case. And whatever stories you've been told about how, barter and trade, and you had to earn these promissory notes, and then these guys had to, and that's how money evolved, that's all nonsense. It's all rubbish. It's all the disinformation. Money was maliciously and specifically introduced as a tool of enslavement at a specific point in time by the kings and the priests, and introduced into the human race as a tool of control and oppression, and slavery.
Right.
And for those that have watched the wonderful Zeitgeist series, those guys put it very beautifully. That once when you enslave people physically, you have to give them housing, food, and shelter. If you enslave people through the monetary or the financial system, They have to house themselves, feed themselves, and clothe themselves.
Right.
And then they have to still work for you to earn that money. It's a beautiful system. It's so beautifully crafted.
Yep.
So how do we relieve ourselves from this slavery and this oppression? You got to remove money from the system.
Right.
Now, when you say that to some people, that sends shivers up their spine. But I've been studying this for the last 5 years, virtually very soon after I released Slave Species of God, my first book in 2005. And I can tell you that what I call contributionism, or a new social structure on Earth that works without money, without the concept of barter or trade, you've got to eliminate that. Because he who has more to sell will eventually take control and rule the roost.
Right.
Without the concept of value being attached to items and things that people do. Once you start embracing that and looking at that kind of structure, where people do what they do best, what is their God-given talents, or what they choose to really, to hone their craft and hone their talents. Once people do that and contribute their ability to the best of their ability for the greater benefit of the entire community, and if everybody does that, you will be absolutely blown away by what happens. And it's not something that's easily understandable by many people in a simplistic structure.
Right.
Because we are completely and utterly brainwashed by capitalism and what's in it for me and how's this going to work and how could this possibly work without money. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And yet the answers are so simple and so beautiful and so smooth. And what I can tell you, because you said we're running out of time, so what I can tell you is that the abundance of everything is so spectacular. And I mean abundance. And contributionism doesn't mean we're going to go back and live in caves. In fact, it's completely the opposite. It releases the ability for scientists to make great discoveries, for free energy, for amazing new advanced technology in agriculture, in the building of cities, and all the things that you could possibly imagine. So much so that the abundance is so spectacular that people probably only have to work like 2 or 3 hours a day in whatever it is they choose to do, which they love to do. So imagine the whole world waking up every day, singing and whistling and being happy because they're going to do what it is they love to do, and not being miserable and unhappy and cheesed off because they hate their job, they hate their boss, they hate their life, and they have to go and do this miserable job because they need to earn money so they can buy bread and pay rent at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm. No, well, I'm with you on that, and it's a piece that I spend a lot of time with myself. And one of the things that I came up with a long time ago is, right now as I speak to you and you speak to me, there are literally millions of dollars passing through us at any given point in time. We are being interpenetrated by zeros and ones that are flying around the world. And when you think about economy on that level, it becomes fairly abstract, and at the same time, it also becomes very simple. And what we're dealing with is really what I call the economy of light, or the invisible economy, and this whole idea of zeros and ones flooding through us, going from San Francisco to Japan or back again, is really kind of a very subtle physical manifestation of what I think you might be talking about, and that is this whole concept of being able to free up our own personal energy so that we can contribute to something. And as a result, there's something that takes place. There's an interchange that takes place with this. And we don't understand it enough because we have been inbred to have 3,000 years worth of indentured servitude, and our capacity to grasp these concepts are stunted. But I'll tell you, and I bet you get it, there are people that are up in the upper 0.5% that understand this perfectly.
Absolutely. There's some people that, when I introduce the concept of contributionism to them, they get it instantly. some people sort of think they get it, and some people just can't get it. They can't understand how you could possibly imagine you could survive in a world without money. They just don't understand it. And those are the people that you need to slowly nurture into it. But just to add to what you're saying is, I believe that the first 270,000 years on planet Earth, in those colonies in southern Africa, those mining colonies, were pretty much contributionist societies. There was no money.
Yeah.
So everything was happening, and they were doing everything so that everybody could survive and have an abundance on everything, so they could mine the stuff that was so desperately needed.
Right.
If they weren't supported in abundance, then you can imagine that mining activity would have collapsed very quickly.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I believe we coming back. So when I said we completing some sort of a strange ancient prophecy, I believe that is part of that prophecy, and we're probably going to tap into that basic fundamental contributionist structure that we had a long, long time ago and bring it back into our new modern day structure, but with subtle adaptations based on our current levels of consciousness and knowledge. And it's consciousness that becomes the key word here, consciousness and spirituality. You cannot have contributionism without consciousness and spirituality, because ultimately everything comes from unity.
Okay.
The universe and all things in it could not exist unless it came from unity. And we don't really have time to explain that, but and within unity, some people might think, oh, it's boring, everything's going to be the same, everyone's going to be the same, doing the same. That is not the case. It is only within unity that you have infinite diversity. And these are very important and very basic, simple things that people need to start to embrace and just think about it until it starts to make sense to you, because that really is the essence of it. And contributionism is exactly that same thing, where you have unity within societies and structures, where you have absolute unity but infinite diversity of the people that are part and parcel of that society that contribute to the greater benefit of all.
Right. Well, this is something I'd love to talk more with you about, and perhaps we can catch up with you later on in your tour and have part 2 of this conversation if you're up for it.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. I love talking to you. It's lovely. You seem to be a really clued up guy, and it's lovely. I love talking to people that know this subject and are clearly consciously and spiritually connected. So it's great chatting to you, man. And let's do it again before I leave the United States.
That sounds great. So let's give people your website, Michael. It's is it slavespecies.com? Is that what it is?
My main website is slavespecies.com. They can also check out adamscalendar.com, and also the website for our foundation that I'm really trying to raise funds for, the research that we're doing and the archaeological digs that we plan to do, which is makomati.org, and that Makomati is MAKOMATI.org.
Great. And then people can go onto your main website and find out where you're going to be appearing and see you in person and then ask you questions and buy materials and books and all that stuff, right?
That's right. Yeah, look, I'm like a traveling salesman at the moment in the United States. We take books with us and we have them available at the presentations, at the talks. So if you can't find them at a bookstore near you, you can come and get them at the presentation when I'm in town.
That's great. Okay, well, get yourself a good night's rest and have a terrific presentation tomorrow in the Phoenix area. And we'll catch up with you sometime later in your tour. Okay, Michael?
Robert, thanks very much. Lovely talking to you, and talk to you soon again.
Take good care now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there we go. That was Michael Tellinger, and we just spent the last hour kind of skimming the surface in a lot of ways with his material. I mean, I'm sure we could have gone another 60 minutes and gone even deeper. And I'm looking forward to having him back on, because I definitely want to dive into his research a lot more. And he's going to be in my neck of the woods in a couple of weeks. He's going to be up here in Oakland, California, which is not far from where I'm living. And hope to see him in person and then take our dialogue to another level. So Michael Tellinger, you can catch him on tour. You can see him on his website or find out where he's going to be on tour on his website, slavespecies.com, and get into the prehistory, the genetic disposition, the alien genetic disposition of the human and the woman on Earth. You ever think about the name Earth? You ever really pondered the name Earth? Well, if you break Earth down, it essentially breaks down into two parts of the word. The first part is Ea, and then the last part is Earth, the RTH. Ea is another name for Enki. It's another name for Enki, Enki Ea. And so Earth is really the place of Ea. That's what it means. It's like the hearth of Ea, the house. It is the house of Ea, which is the house of Enki. So all you have to do is go right into the nomenclature, the etymology of our world, this Earth. You may want to shift it to Terra, if we want to claim it. If we want our own Earth, we want our own world, if we don't want to be a slave species anymore, I think Terra would be a nice choice. Certainly better than hell. I take Terra over hell, although a lot of people would say that that's where we are. I'm going to play just a little brief piece of music here. I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about some other things since I've got about 48 minutes left. I may not go the full 2 hours, but I just whipped up this little piece of music. And I was going to play at the beginning of the show, but it's going to give me a little bit of a breather here, and I'll come back on the other side. It's only about a minute or so. And I'll see you on the other side of this brief interlude. Here we go. Yeah, that was going to be my intro music for tonight, but I went with the other piece, which is unbridling our genetic spool. That's kind of the theme for the evening: is who are we, where do we come from, and what are we going to do once we have the knowledge that we come from most likely alien species that crank us up and crank us out to go into the earth and take out gold so that they could either have a multidimensional experience of reality and allow them to move in and out of time and move in and out of various dimensions, or perhaps even power their craft so that they can return to their homelands or their home planet. Jay Widener, who I've had on the show previously, his take is that the Anunnaki never went away. And what they did is they went underground, and that they kept themselves apart from this recycling of life that takes place on the Earth via the coronal mass ejection. So Jay's take is that they never split, that they're still here. And that could be the case. They could be underground dwellers and have hung out. Or he also posits the theory that they went away to Mars when they hit coronal mass ejection and they came back from Mars, and they showed up and they all have red hair and look like Caucasians. So you know, it's an interesting story. I think it's probably the most important story that we can spend time with and do our best to understand. And that's an ancient story. And then what Michael was talking about in terms of free energy, that's a future story. And that future story is really a part of the here and now. And when I have Michael back on the show, what I want to talk about with him is to explore the fact that we actually have discovered these phenomenal sources of energy. And in fact, I just put up on my website a couple of weeks ago, I think it might have been last week. In fact, I was actually going into this whole slave species thing. And then, of course, from, you know, sort of from the left side, you know, Janet Gaudier came in and then brought Michael Tellinger into my life. So I was already going down this slave species route, and then Michael showed up, which is kind of interesting. But on the piece that I have on my website, which is about the slave species in the slave planet, is that Ben Rich was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, and he passed away this past summer in July of 2010. And Ben Rich was the guy that was in charge of the B-1 bomber, the stealth bomber. That was his baby. Well, there was more than the B-1 bomber. Trust me. It was just one thing that him and a group of 50 dedicated engineers and metallurgists and machinists, they all worked on together. And Ben Rich on his deathbed talks about alien technology and how they've had it since the 40s, and how they use it to actually go to the stars. So, and he said, quote unquote, this is a direct quote from him, that we've got it, and it would take an act of God to free that up and use it for the benefit of humanity. And I believe that. I believe that. And I believe that based on not just what Ben Rich disclosed on his deathbed, but also when you look at the some of the other pieces that are, you know, that are out there, like, you know, Alternative 3 and the brain drain that took place. It's actually a pretty interesting sort of faux documentary. The documentary was created, I think, in like the early 70s, a BBC documentary. You can look it up. It's probably online, Alternative 3. It's fascinating, but it's about this brain drain of scientists. And they posit evidence that we started going to Mars actually in the early 60s, and that all the moon stuff took place in the 50s. That you just slide everything back by about 20 years. In terms of the Mars stuff, well, you do the math on that. Gary McKinnon, who was the young man who has Asperger's over in England, and he tapped into the database of the Department of Defense and got into the naval database, and he found evidence of all these ships that were commissioned for deep space. That's what it said. That's what he found out. And there are all these names of these ships that don't have any affiliation with any ship here on this planet. So you've got the McKinnon stuff, you've got Alternative 3, you've got the Ben Rich material. You know, there's information out there about John von Neumann and how he was able to take the work that he did with the Philadelphia experiment and really throw it into the 25th century. And you've got, people that are moving out of this time-space location, this time-space signature, and moving into alternate lives, all parallel universes. I mean, this is stuff that, theoretically these guys were working on in a very big way. So you've got all of these technologies that are out there, and it's incredibly futuristic, and it's mind warping, actually. If you believe that this stuff exists, and I'm convinced that it exists, and you had to wrap your head around it, and you weren't in training. It's like people like myself and Michael and just about everybody else who listens to my show or comes to my website. You're in training. You're in training, and you're in training to understand these realities that we're going to be staring down. That's what you're doing. That's what we're doing. This is the multidimensional aerobics that we're engaging in right now. We're doing everything in our power to get up to speed as quickly as possible so that we can embody these concepts, embody these ancient concepts of the creation myths and where we came from and how we came to be, to where we're headed and where people already are with the technology, with the sophistication of the technology, the mind-blowing sophistication of the technology, and bridging these two disparate realms together, the deep future and the ancient past. And here we are in the middle, and in the middle where we're all, theoretically more or less, struggling to some extent, plotting, crawling along, whatever words you want to use in this essential reality and in this common paradigm where we're getting put into a vice grip, an economic vice grip. And what it's doing is it's forcing people in a lot of ways to try to understand what's going on. And, we're on a pretty aggressive timeline here to figure that out. Very aggressive timeline. And I think the good thing is that we are. Will we figure it out in time? Will we have enough time to figure it out? I'm not sure. I hope we do. I'd love to see it. I would love to see it. I think one of the things that we still don't fully understand is our ability to, for lack of a better term, influence reality. And I'll give you just a quick little story which happened to me over the weekend. It's kind of a twofold story. So I went out on Friday night to get a dog for my son. Okay. And I had found this dog online. His name was Leo, the king. Okay, that's Leo, the king, right? Astrological sign Leo. And the guy who was giving Leo away sounded like a very nice guy. Dog belonged to his brother. Brother moved out, went to a place that couldn't keep the dog. Guy was stuck with the dog, needed to give it away. Okay. I asked him, what kind of dog is it? He said, it's a Catahoula. I said, oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of a Catahoula. So I looked him up online. Very interesting looking dog. I mean, they've got spots, and they're gray, and they're blue, and they're brown, and they got, crazy looking eyes. And I'm like, this is an interesting dog. And then I read more about the dog. I said, wow, interesting breed. I like this. He says, well, he's about 3 feet tall, and he weighs about 45 pounds. I said, wow. Okay. And looked at the pictures. It's very hard to get a sense of a dog from a picture. So I look at the picture, I go, okay, he looks like a handsome dog, fine. So I get my son and we drive and we go out to see where to meet this guy at a shopping center. And I pull in, and next thing I know, he pulls up and he's out with the dog, even before I knew it. And let me tell you, this dog was not a dog. It was a dog, but it was a beast. I mean, the size of this dog's head, it was bigger than my son's head. Okay, that's how big his head was, and he had a huge chest. You know, this big, deep chest, strong. The dog must have weighed about 90 pounds. I'm a good judge of dogs and weight. That was a 90-pound dog. This is a big dog. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, Jesus Christ, this dog is a horse. And the first thing he did is he's a very friendly guy. He was a friendly guy, very, you know, he's gregarious. He was a Leo. He puts his paws up on my son's shoulders and starts looking my son in the ear. I go, oh, isn't this cute? And all of a sudden he takes his paws and he kind of digs him into his shoulders and puts his weight on and starts humping him. And you know, and he's going at it. My son doesn't know what he's doing, but it's clear that Leo, you know, wants a little action. It tackles my son on the parking lot of the shopping center. I'm thinking, well, this is funny, but I'm not sure if this is going to be a good fit. But I've committed to it. My son's there. You don't want to let a little kid down. Trust me. And I said, okay, all right. So they give me his dog food, and they gives me this device. It's like the anti-barker, or the debarker, or whatever that thing is. Yes, it's a debarker. So what does that mean? Well, if he barks too much, you just turn on. It works. Trust me, it works. Great. Not only do I have this beast, but apparently he barks a lot, and I've got to use this device to mute him. Oh my God! It all happened so fast, you know. It was like this onslaught. And this kid who was there, this guy's son, so they're saying, "Say goodbye, say goodbye, say goodbye to Leo." And I'm waiting for him to say goodbye to Leo, to do something to show that he had some type of affection or feeling towards Leo. And I just watched the kid sit there. He just stood there. He's probably about 8 or 9 years old. He just stood there looking at the dog. And I asked him, I said, are you going to miss Leo? And he said, well, sort of. Okay, so I get Leo in my car. Now, I don't have a small car. I've got a Land Rover. And he gets in the back seat. My kid he still sits in one of those booster seats. I think my ex-wife wants him to sit in there until he's 13. So Leo, so that takes up part of the seat. Leo, his head is touching the top of the car, on the inside of the car. And if he laid it down, his head would have been on top of my son's lap. I'm like, this is just wild. But it all happened so fast. So I go, okay, well, here we go. And then I go to start the car up, and it won't start. Wow, this is interesting. Now I've got this dog, and my car won't start. And I could tell it wasn't a battery. You know, if you spend any time around cars, you know it's not a battery, because if it's a battery, you had no juice. I mean, you know, electricity or anything. I had electricity. I had lights. But yeah, I had that, which meant it was an alternator. So what am I going to do? So I called the guy up and say, Mike, it's Robert. You won't believe this. My car won't start. I can't take the dog. It's like, I got to figure out how to get home. I just can't take this dog right now. He says, okay, we're not that far. I'll come back. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. He says, oh, and he said, we'll give you a jump. I'll give you a jump. I'm like, okay. Something, maybe I do need a jump. I'll try it. He comes back. I can't even turn the key. Before I could get the clicking sound. Now he comes back, key won't even turn. Even if I wanted to jump, and even if it could jump it, wasn't going to happen. I'm like, dude, this is not going to happen. Okay, so back goes Leo. And I got to tell you, Leo was in like some little like Toyota or something. I couldn't believe it. We were hauling this dog around this Toyota. I feel sorry for Leo. Leo needs 40 acres and a long bed pickup to hang out in. You know, and it was interesting that once I had him, because there was a little period of time after I called and before they came back, I had him on the leash, and I walked him around. He was actually a lot more calm when I was doing that. He was a lot more calm. It was like they didn't really know how to handle Leo. So the moral of the story, what's the moral of the story? Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because everything lined up in that moment for me not to have that dog. It was not insignificant. It all happened in a very, very divinely guided and ordained way. I was not meant to have that dog for whatever reason. It's not my dog. And I understand these things. It's hard to tell that to a 6-year-old, but that's one level of reality, right? This is the level of reality where reality acts upon us. This is where we understand that we're not, everybody says, well, you're God, you're God, you're God. We're all God. Well, we're not all God. We're not all God. And yet we are. This is the dichotomy of the universe, right? This is really this is the cone, the laughing cone at the center of the universe. You're God and you're not God. You're the center of everything and you're not the center of everything. And then you got to work out the dance in between. This is the polarity. The polarity. This is the opposition. So in that moment, I was not God. Or maybe some people would say, well, that was your higher self. Your higher self conspired to do all this. Well, great. My higher self is like hanging out with God up there, and they're saying, hey, look, not a good fit. Let's kill that engine. Let's freeze that lock. The atoms conspired against me to get that dog. My will was ineffective. Ineffective. Not going to happen. So I come back the next day, and it's right by a record store called Rasputin's. I used to work at Rasputin's many years ago. Not that one, but another one. And I've been trying to find like Stevie Wonder's greatest hits or Inner Visions. Visions are my two favorite Stevie Wonder records. And I've been trying to find sort of the greatest hits online. And I went to eMusic, and I couldn't find them on eMusic. Nothing really by Stevie Wonder. I really been jonesing for that 70s version. Everything up to Master Blaster, Stevie Wonder. So there it was, by Rasputin's. I'm thinking, maybe I could go in there and find Stevie Wonder's greatest hits while I'm waiting for all this. And I'm waiting around for the tow truck, contemplating going into Rasputin's. And all of a sudden, this car that's parked in front of Rasputin's starts playing Stevie Wonder's greatest hits and tracking through the various songs. And this is about 5 minutes after I'd had this thought. Now, mind you, I had had that thought the night before, too, while I was there. But I didn't move on it. But then the next day, there's the car playing Stevie Wonder's greatest hits 5 minutes after I've had this song. So now I am influencing reality, theoretically. Now I am, on some level, merging my thought with reality. And reality is being pretty malleable at that point. So somewhere in between the two is really the modality that I'm talking about. That we can influence reality. We can influence the world around us, and it's thought. It's really thought, plain and simple. And there are other times when we can't, and then we have to step back and we have to understand that there's a greater thought or a greater current of thought that wants to direct us into another direction. Because if we can do that, if we can hold both of those planes of existence and embody and anchor the duality of both of those realms, then we can move forward. If we go too far one way, then we sit around on our thumbs all the time waiting for God to tell us what to do. And if we go too far in the other direction, we're completely Luciferian and ultimately become likely psychopathic. Because that's what people that have inordinate amounts of power and resources without any real connection to some sort of governing or guiding principle That's what they de-evolve into, because they don't have any limits theoretically in this world. And if we can somehow balance the two, then we can be pretty successful in tapping into the magic and the knowledge and the wisdom and all the multidimensional promise that we have as a species, while at the same time honoring something far greater, far larger, far more compassionate, far more loving, far more universal than we understand, really. You bring the two of them together, you have the Malkuth Bekether, the fruit to the root. So let's see what we got here. We've got we got no callers. Everybody want to call in, say hello. I'm going to shut this down in about 5 minutes or so, since I've rambled. Yeah, so here we are. Human species, Homo sapien. At least most of us are. I, unfortunately, do not have any claim to fame. I don't have any special or magic DNA inside of me. I'm not a walk-in. I'm not an abductee. I wasn't taken away from this plane and taken to another and educated somewhere else. Never been in a spaceship, at least not to my knowledge. I've had some interesting multidimensional experiences, but I'm your plain run-of-the-mill human in this incarnation. And I'm doing my very best to learn as much about it as possible. All right, here we go. That's it. That's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll get into the headlines on the Daily Forecast. Next week, I've got another guest on Sunday night next week. I'm on a roll now. Stephen Gray will be my guest next week, and he is into sacred plant medicine. So we're talking entheogens, we're talking ayahuasca, peyote, psilocybin, you name it. We're gonna get into it, and we're gonna get into it from a cultural perspective, and how these sacred plants and sacred medicine can actually help speed up our cultural evolution and get us closer to the speed of life, and really help us with elegant solutions and more novel and more complex creativity and advancements. I've got a 908 line here. Who's this? The 908 line. Let's find out. There's a caller here before I shut her down. Let's see who it is, and we'll get into it. Hi, you're on the air with Robert. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Peace, how are you? My name is Sierra. I'm from New Jersey in North Carolina. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing tonight?
Good. I just wanted to thank you. I just, was just surfing on blogtalk, trying to find something to put myself to rest tonight in peace, and I came across your radio show. I just wanted to tell you you're doing a wonderful job with explaining to people the different levels of thought and the power of will, without making it so complex, and to the point where it can, totally, well, I'm there with you, you know what I mean, in terms of that training of thought. But I mean, even with determining and judging for those who may just be coming into this thought, seemingly we're in a period of time where everyone is growing into a higher state of consciousness, even if they're religious. But I just wanted to commend you and say you're doing a great job with breaking it down for people to comprehend, no matter what train of thought or level of thought that they're on. So I wanted to applaud you and commend you. It's very, very enlightening tonight.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And this whole vehicle, Blog Talk Radio, is pretty fascinating in that I started off just wanting to use the technology so that I could do what I do, and what I didn't really factor into at the time is that there is an evolving community in this place, and people like yourself can cruise through here and find a show, and the next thing you know, they're listening in, and it's a pretty dynamic and really interesting experience. And I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad you caught the show tonight. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. Just keep teaching the masses. You got people from all walks of life, all races, all religions, all creeds waking up. So We just got to do our jobs and go out there and teach while we have the chance to before they regulate this internet. So continue to teach, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Amen to that. Take care. Good night now.
Good night.
So there we go. That's the beauty of Blog Talk. This is what we're talking about. The beauty of the technology that's been gifted to us right here, right now, and it is quantifying our experience. We are moving in a quantum, multidimensional, multidirectional, and have been since really 1996 with the advent of this technology. And she's right. I mean, there's a very good chance that that the walls will come down on this. So we've got to, at some point in time, and nothing is written in stone. Okay, what Michael Tellinger has discovered in South Africa, that's written in stone. Nothing is written in stone. Even the Zeta Reticuli who came to Roswell, New Mexico, or who came to visit with Dwight D. Eisenhower and showed him and what's his name, Light, Bishop Light, the hologram of the end of the earth and the hologram of the crucifixion of Jesus. The end of the earth, even the hologram that they've shown us, is not written in stone. It's not. Okay, it's just not. And we have an opportunity to rewrite the future every single day with every single passing moment. And the best way to do it is to do your best to remain conscious. It's hard, very hard, but it's do your best to remain conscious and don't give in to fear. That's really that's the anchor. That's the drag. Yeah, okay. Enough of my testifying tonight. That's it. I'm going to be back tomorrow with the headlines. Oh, by the way, one other thing. Besides Steve and Greg, who I'm going to have on next Sunday, I've got a line into Greg, Pensacola Greg, who's on the front lines down in Florida with the Gulf oil spill. And I'm going to reach out to him on Monday and try to set something up with him this week. And we'll try to get an update with him, what's going on in the Gulf, and just stay abreast of that very powerful and evolving situation. That's it. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to Far Sunday. I will see you tomorrow morning on the Daily Farcast. And as always, use your head to discern what's real and use your heart to stay open to what's possible. Until then, sleep well. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send you out tonight on a oceanic lullaby.